Today's topic is called Conflict in the Church. Conflict? Never. Today's reading from Acts brings us to the very nucleus of a new church. Jesus, the answer to the ancient prophecy, one who will be born to save all. One church, one faith are equal. So far, so good. Now we move forward to the disciples and their ministry. Paul was teaching the disciples to follow the teaching of Jesus, to become the leaders of the new church by training and discussing their missions and sending out with their commissions, especially coming from God. The disciples were sent out in twos with God's blessings. However, the Acts reading is showing us that among his disciples in the early churches, there may have been bits of argy-bargy and tussle, with some people wanting to do things their own way. This resulted in disruption in the early church, and it came under the two missionaries from the new church who went out under their own steam. They went out unprepared, untrained, and not knowing what their commission was. They visited many of the new churches, persuading the converts to observe the Jewish laws. This went against the teaching of Jesus and Paul, who was teaching the Jewish church to accept his law-free Gentile mission. But conflict took place. Yep, conflict. Everywhere in the world has conflict at some time, be it a bit of a quiet bicker or yelling, or fisticuffs, or a duel at dawn. And that's not even mentioning lifelong vendettas, or worse still, war. Let's think about it, and think about conflict in church. It's been there since the word religion was created. And Christianity, oh dear. Let me tell you a story. You see, once upon a time, long, long ago, in a land far, far away, there were ancient Israelites believing in one God and trying to steer clear of other beliefs. Many beliefs, all with their own gods. Enter Abram and his wife Sarah, who were unable to conceive. So one of Abraham's servants, Hagar, had a baby for Abraham called Ishmael. Then the story goes on. God answered Abraham's and Sarah's prayers and gave Sarah and Abraham a child. Abraham sent away Hagar and her child Ishmael. But God protected Hagar and Ishmael and promised to make Ishmael a great nation. And so the faith of Abraham went on to become the Jewish faith, and it is considered that the faith of Ishmael grew to become the Islamic faith. Could this have been the first schism in faith? Well, the jury's out on that, and no doubt excerpts in church history would know all the arguments for and against my theory. The Israelites continued to believe in the one true God, which eventually became the Jewish faith, a faith waiting for God to send his Son. By this time I was thinking, quite a time since I put a sermon together, sat here surrounded by study books. Time for a cuppa, I thought. Over the years, I found one of the things surrounding the compilation of a sermon is the amount of reading I do, because I don't have a particularly great recall memory, and there's no surprise there. So time to give the brain cell a break, a cup of tea, and a walk round the garden. So back, revitalised and with a good brew of tea, and raring to go again. We move on over 2,100 years. The ancient prophecy has come true. Jesus came to bring his good news that all sins are forgiven and all were loved by God. Jesus chose and taught 12 disciples to spread the good news throughout the world when he'd gone to his Father in heaven. The disciples were to go out fully trained and commissioned to carry out the work of Jesus. Paul went on to lead the church in Rome and followed the teachings of Jesus by sending out the fully trained disciples in twos to spread the good news. Barnabas and Paul were to set off on their second missionary journey. But Barnabas wanted John Mark to go with them. Unfortunately, an argument between Barnabas and Paul arose, and Bible reading says they had a huge row. Paul strongly disagreed because John Mark had previously deserted them during their first journey. Verse 39 says, "They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took John Mark and sailed for Cyprus to be successful in starting a new Cypriot church. Paul and Silas, commissioned by the church, headed to Syria and Cilicia." Do I see God at work here, wanting to start a new church in Syria and Cyprus? Fortunately, this disagreement only led to a temporary separation, and Paul later reconciled with both Barnabas and John Mark. God remained silent, listening, waiting. But you see, perhaps there's something to be said in the silence of waiting. Is it possible that over time, Barnabas and Paul learnt patience? And further still, there's another lesson here. We also learn that the Bible doesn't hide weaknesses and the failures of people. And by waiting and listening, we can become stronger in our faith. The apostles, who'd pioneered the early church, would argue and bicker, but look what they achieved. The infant church slowly spread out across Europe and beyond. And so again, we move on in time. Another large conflict within the church. And I quote from the Oxford Concise Dictionary of the Christian Church, which says, "There were major ecclesiastical differences of beliefs, leadership, language, culture between the Greek East and the Roman West in 1054, creating the schism between the Catholic and the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope, and the Orthodox churches with Constantine Patriarch, the Byzantine Emperor, with their different beliefs, leadership, language and culture." And yet another major conflict. The 16th century saw another split with the Catholic Church during the Reformation, leading to Catholicism and Protestant churches. And of course, further splits over the years throughout different types of churches, each trusting and believing in the one true God. And according to Google, in the Christian church, there are globally estimated to be 45,000 denominations. Luckily for us, I'm not going to go through them all. I now move on briefly to disagreements we might have in churches. Always a difficult one, as they do happen. During delving through bits and pieces, I came across reference to Lessons for Churches in Conflict by John Bloom, in which he talks about when sharp disagreements separate. Good old Google for information, I say. I read bits and pieces from the book, and found a good quote. It's inevitable that disagreements will arise between Christians. Our call is to pursue faithfulness in disagreement, with love always our aim. The thing is, we can read about all sorts of problems and how to sort them out. But then there's the reality of resolving the fractures. Two people can talk through and fix things, though sometimes easier said than done, and fortunately rifts can happen. And at the worst, sometimes people leave to find another church, which is rather sad. It isn't good to bury the problem deeper either, or think that the problem will go away. I mean, this is a church, and surely as Christians we don't actually have rows. Such bad words to each other. But that isn't realism. We're human. A good way is to talk things about it, if possible, with each other, or find a person you can trust to mediate and listen to share the problem. Here we have 3 clergy, 5 lay ministers, 2 wardens. Not only that, there's access to a lot of people in other churches, and plus our safeguarding teams. In an experienced Christian, the word is prayer. Pray to God for help. It will come. Find your comfortable area or zone and pray. And yes, I've been there, thinking, who can I talk to? Enter being a single person having the no cat to kick syndrome. It can be very, very isolating at times. Fortunately, over the years, I've found people I feel comfortable with and can trust. You see, life happens. There will be ups and downs, and I have a sneaky feeling that God sends me little problems now and again to keep me on my toes, and it certainly keeps me praying. The main thing I'm trying to say is, try not to fester. Look around to the church to see if there's someone you feel comfortable with who will listen, help, and pray. Today's Bible reading shows 2 very human people who differed. We're not told how long the split lasted, but I'm sure they would have prayed for help and also asked the other disciple who they were travelling with for help and prayer. The point being, Paul and Barnabas resolved their differences, and that was with God's help in prayer. And better still, God is there to help us too. So keep on praying. Keep on praying. God is there for us. Amen.